Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another day of Throne of Eldraine previews. We're going to look at the cards that were previewed over the last 24 hours or so. If you're curious as to which content creator presented which card, check out the description below. All that information is down there. Also, if you're looking to pick up Throne of Eldraine products, check out FlipsideGaming.com. Use that Heroes promo code, save yourself a little cash, and that also supports the channel. That's always appreciated. But without any further ado, let's get into it. We're going to begin this video as we usually do by looking at variations on cards we talked about yesterday that we did not see in yesterday's video. So 3 cards now have an extended art version revealed that we didn't have yesterday, and 1 card has the regular version revealed because yesterday we saw the extended art copy. Those cards are on the screen now: Linden, the Steadfast Queen, Black Lance Paragon, Torbrand Thane of Redfell, and Jorvo, Lord of Garenbrig. Before we get into the new Throne of Eldraine cards today, there were some Judge promos that were announced. Here they are: Monastery Mentor with brand new art, Yuriko the Tiger Shadow that has the same art that it had previously, Chalice of the Void, and Reflecting Pool. Those pieces of art were actually used previously on Magic Online for promo cards. That's the first time, though, those pieces of art have been in paper. Now, let's move on to the Throne of Eldraine cards. Acclaimed Contender. This is actually a pretty sweet rare. It's a 3 casting cost 3/3. That's already got my attention. Also, it's a knight. We know that's going to be very relevant because of this set. And when this enters the battlefield, if you control another knight, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a knight, aura, equipment, or legendary artifact card from among them, put it into your hand. The rest go on the bottom in a random order. So let's talk limited first. I'm going to play this card just for the stats, 3/3 for 3. It's rare, you won't see it all the time, but the economy there is great. Now, if I can have some other knights alongside it, wonderful, because if I can also get potentially a card off the top of my deck with this, that's phenomenal. Obviously, if you have a lot of knights in your sealed pool or you're drafting a lot of knights, this card is going to be better, but you don't have to do that. It's still very playable regardless. Standard, can this see play there? Yeah, I think if there's a knight deck in the format, this could definitely be a part of it. Not only because it has that great economy, that's a perfect starter for this card, but also because you have a very good chance at pulling a card out of a constructed deck. Definitely a knight in a knight deck should hopefully show up in the top 5 cards, if nothing else. And even if you do miss with it, like, it's not the end of the world because you did get some board presence, and there's going to be other things that interact with knights out there. If you don't have another knight on the battlefield and you play this, same thing. It's not the end of the world. Another place to play this would be Knight Tribal in those singleton formats too. Fortifying Provisions. This is kind of an interesting common. When it comes to drafter sealed, it might not always make your cut, but getting an extra bump in toughness, not the worst thing in the world by any means. You are paying 3 for this though, but what puts it over the top for me is when it enters the battlefield, it creates a food token. So if I'm in a deck that cares about food or cares about artifacts, either way, because we saw a lot of blue cards that do care about artifacts, then this definitely becomes very playable in those circumstances. Outside of limited, could this see standard play? Not really feeling it there. Maybe if a high alert deck could get there, but obviously we would need a lot more pieces before that would become a reality, I think. Might see some pauper play though, because it can help protect small creatures from things like electrickery. Mysterious Pathlighter, fantastic limited uncommon here. First off, it is a fairy, maybe that will matter. Secondly, it's got Windrake stats. 2/2 flyer for 3. That itself is very playable and limited, but wait, there's more. Each creature you control that has an adventure enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. I think adventures could be a great draft archetype from what I've been seeing. And there could even be some seal pools where you could put together a lot of adventures and some things that care about them. Also, with some of the cards we're going to look at today, I don't think standard adventures is out of the question. Realm Cloaked Giant. This one is a mythic. On the left, you see the regular copy. On the right, you see the showcase copy. So this card is pretty amazing for limited. We'll start there. It's a mythic. You won't see it all the time. But I'm not thrilled about this necessarily because of the giant. That's fine. But I love the adventure. Cast off. 2 white and 3 sorcery adventure. Destroy all non-giant creatures. So I don't care if you're playing with a lot of giants or not. That is a board sweep. It's going to almost hit everything. Go ahead and play with this card if you can get your hands on it. In limited, it's always good to have a board sweep like that as a panic button. If you fall behind, if things aren't going your way, or if this is in your hand, you can play a little slower, try to make your opponent overcommit. A board sweep at the right time could simply be game winning sometimes. Then later on, you have access to a sizable creature. Normally, if you are ahead and you draw a board sweep, it feels like you're stumbling a little bit because you want to maintain pressure. But what's cool about this one is if you do have 7 mana at any point, you're not really stumbling because you can put down a huge creature, 7/7 with Vigilance. When it comes to the standard environment, I do think you're going to see a little bit of this card. It is a board sweep that is competitively costed. Like I said, this will definitely see standard play. Maybe a little awkward that it does not hit Bone Crusher Giant, which is one of the better cards that we've seen previewed so far. Obviously, that is a giant. Singleton formats, maybe you can play Giant Tribal, or else it's just a good sweeper, if nothing else. Shepherd of the Flock. This is one of the more pushed adventure cards that I've seen so far. The creature side is a white and 1, 3/1. Okay, those are fine and limited. Sometimes they make your cut, sometimes they don't. But check out the other side here. Usher to safety, 1 white, instant adventure. Return target permanent you control to its owner's hand. Instant speed, pick up any permanent you'd like that you control, put it back in your hand. A lot of reasons to do that. You could be protecting something for just 1 white. You could be bouncing something that has a good enters the battlefield effect. Or you could be bouncing something that has an adventure attached to it. Tons of value in bounce when it comes to these adventures. Play the adventure, play the creature, bounce the creature, do it again. That could be great for you in Drafter Sealed for sure. Let's talk about limited. Do you play it? Sure you do. This is an uncommon. These will be floating around. And if you have the opportunity to use this card, I think it's going to be very good for you. You're going to find something to do with that bounce effect. Now, it gets even better with cards that care about adventures, and there are quite a few of them out there. Okay, what about standard? Could this see play there? I think it could. It has potential. The reason is neither side of the card is necessarily super impressive, but the flexibility of having it together is actually pretty good, and we're going into an environment where people will be playing adventures. Maybe there's even an adventure standard deck. If that's the case, then yeah, this definitely would see play there. But even if there isn't a deck like that, I still think it has potential to see play. This actually could work well with everybody's favorite card, Teferi Time Raveler, so keep an eye on this one. We'll have to see what it does once it is in the format. Fae of Wishes. This is another amazing adventure card. This one's also a fairy, so make note of that. Let's break this down. First off, the creature portion is a pretty good blocker, if nothing else. 1/4 flyer for a blue and 1. You can pay a blue and 1, discard 2 cards, and return this to its owner's hand. So the good part of that is you can actually use the adventure more than 1 time per game. So what is that adventure? Granted. Blue and 3 sorcery adventure. You may choose a non-creature card you own from outside the game, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So for competitive purposes, of course, that would be the sideboard. If you're playing Drafter Sealed, that's the cards you're not using from your pool. Okay, so let's break this down really quick. Let's talk Drafter Sealed first and get that out of the way. This is going to be a great card for you. If you're up against an aggressive build, throw down this creature, gum up not only the ground, but also the air. It will help keep you alive, and then later, if you do want to use the adventure, that's okay. You can bounce this back to your hand and do that. Now, the adventure itself, because you're only going into your sideboard to take a card, sometimes might not be amazing, but game 1, maybe there's something in your sideboard that's going to help you now that you know what the matchup is. Or you could just keep answers in your sideboard, things that maybe you normally would have main decked. You might want to keep a good removal spell outside of the game so that later on you're able to basically tutor it up. That could be really sweet. So yes, it will be good there. But really, I think this card is truly going to shine in standard. It could do some pretty awesome things there. You could go a few directions with this. Sure, you could try to build that Adventures deck, and this could be part of it perhaps. But I think this card actually could do even more outside of that archetype. The low-hanging fruit, I suppose, would be like a blue version of the Mastermind's Acquisition deck. You could do something like that. But where I think this could actually be awesome is Reanimation. Let's say I get my Reanimation targets in my hand. I play this for 2. Pay a blue and 1, discard 2 cards. Maybe I can throw away 2 Reanimation targets, or at least 1. This comes back to my hand. Now I can play Granted. I can go and get a Reanimation spell out of my sideboard, reanimate my huge creature. I think that's extremely standard viable. I think this is a card you're going to be seeing a little bit of next season. Giant Skewer. This is a good limited card. It's a common. You'll be able to pick one of these up, I think, if you want one. Not necessarily something that will always make your cut, but if you're playing with Knights, Knights will appreciate the equipment. And of course, food strategies will also appreciate this card. If you need food tokens for your strategy or just artifacts for your strategy, you'll be happy to play this. This in itself is a 2 casting cost artifact as well. If you're in Dimir colors, that might be nice. Garrett Carver, this is a limited card for me at common, and You know what? This is not as bad as you might think at first glance. Let's break it down. A green and 3 human warrior 3/2. Normally, Drafter Sealed, I would avoid playing that at all costs. It's just not very good. Shield's Might. Green 1 instant adventure. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Decent combat trick. Sometimes that would make my cut, sometimes it wouldn't. But here's what I like about them together on one card. Many times I want to play the combat trick, but when I get towards the end of my deck building time, I end up cutting some combat tricks because I just feel like I need creatures. This is kind of the best of both worlds. I'm able to play the combat trick, but then later on still give myself board presence. Sure, not an exceptional creature, but it is a creature, and normally I wouldn't have access to something like this if I was just playing a normal combat trick. Also, remember, we talked about it earlier in the video, but if you do have cards that care about adventures, this becomes that much better. Surfarin the Hengehammer. 2 green legendary creature, human knight 2/2 at uncommon. So these are going to be floating around Drafter Sealed. Whenever this attacks, another target attacking creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is this thing's power. Okay, so if this attacks in, giving something 2/2 isn't amazing, but if you could put some equipment on this, or just buff it in any way, that could be pretty sweet. Considering the startup cost is just 2 mana, you are getting a lot. Now granted, knights tend to be in the Mardu colors, but there are exceptions, and if you can work this into some kind of knight build, wonderful, you might be able to capitalize on some of those knight synergies. But if you didn't, it's okay, because notice it gives the +X/+X to target attacking creature. It doesn't have to be a knight, for example. Like I said, if you can draft some equipment alongside this card could be really fantastic for you. Give the +X/+X bonus maybe to an evasive creature, a flyer, something like that. Definitely a strong uncommon for draft or sealed. Could this see standard play? Maybe in green Stompy. This is going to work really well with Vivian Arcbow Ranger. Definitely worth testing. Commander or Brawl? Maybe more so Brawl. This is kind of an interesting card because if I decided to make this my commander, it could keep coming back. It would be persistent. And I could go ahead and attack in with this if I suited it up. And not only do I have one creature attacking in one direction with a lot of power toughness, but I could also have another creature attacking somebody else with a lot of power toughness if I wanted to. So I kind of like that flexibility. It's an interesting card. I like the design if nothing else. Escape to the Wilds. This is a pretty sweet rare actually. In limited, you're not going to see it a lot, but very playable there just to make sure you can keep finding spells. What's nice is this kind of works like Light Up the Stage. It says exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may play cards exiled this way until the end of your next turn, so you have a little time. On top of that, you may play an additional land this turn. So that's kind of nice because when you see 5 cards, you're probably going to see a land in there or 2. So you are able to maybe take advantage of that clause a lot of the time. Now, when it comes to standard, I think it's going to see standard play. It's a different card from Light Up the Stage because the idea of that card is you kind of want to play that for 1 mana and just use it really quickly. This one is maybe more for the middle of the game, but at the same time, you're going deeper, you're seeing more cards, and you're in a color combination that could have access to a lot of mana potentially. And again, you also have that extra clause that lets you ramp out a little bit. But overall, I think the power level of this card is pretty high. This is something you might actually want to try out with Fires of Invention, the card we saw the other day too. Lucky Clover. Okay, this is the card that kind of said to me, you know what? Maybe there is a chance at a standard adventure deck. This is the piece, or at least one of the pieces, I think that deck would need to be very competitive in that format. It's cheap, 2 casting cost. Whenever you cast an adventure, instant, or sorcery spell, copy it, you may choose new targets for the copy. Feels like there's a lot of efficiency there, and we've been seeing some really sweet adventures for the last couple weeks. I guess we'll find out soon enough if that is a viable strategy in standard, but in limited, definitely. Draft or sealed, if you play with a lot of adventures, this is going to be very beneficial for you. Also, like we've been saying all week too, sometimes it's just good to have artifacts in your deck in this limited environment. This is a very cheap artifact that can get on the board quickly if you needed it to. Next, we're going to look at the rare cycle of lands for the set. We're going to go over this first one, and then I'll kind of tell you what all the lands have in common. I'll give you my overall impressions of the cycle, and then we'll go through and look at each one. The first one is a Portuguese language preview, Castle Ardenvale. When this enters the battlefield, it comes into play tapped unless you control a plains. Taps for white mana, or you can pay 2 white and 2 to tap it and create a 1/1 white human creature token. Okay, so this is a good example of what they all do. They all will tap for one of the 5 colors. They all have an ability attached to them that's going to cost you some mana and tap it. The abilities, some are better than others. They're not game-breaking abilities, but they're attached to a land, so they can be countered, and they have a very small drawback that comes into play tap clause, which isn't that difficult to get around, and even if it does come into play tapped, for most decks, not the end of the world. Because of that, I think these cards are going to see play in various formats. Anywhere where they are illegal, as a matter of fact, I think they could show up. The reason being is you get the extra ability with very, very little drawback. Okay, let's go back to talking about this card individually now. Getting a 1/1 white human creature token for 4 doesn't feel like amazing economy, but again, it's just tacked on to this card. You know what? This is a card you're going to play in Drafter Sealed. The human token actually might matter there with cards like Lovestruck Beast and Harmonious Archon. Other than that, get ready to see these things showing up in constructed formats of all kinds. Castle Embereth. Okay, so this one is a little bit different. The gist is the same though. This time it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain. Taps for red mana. 2 red and 1 in tap. Creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Great ability for red. It can't be countered. You go ahead and throw this land down. Now, I will say this. Aggressive decks that kind of like that ability, they don't want this thing to come into play tapped. Every once in a while, that could be awkward if you happen to draw like 2 of these in your opening hand or something like that. But for the most part, you're going to be playing this probably in like mono red, and it's going to be very good for you there, especially in a more creature-centric mono red deck. If you got too much burn, then maybe it's not too critical. But if you have a lot of small creatures attacking in, maybe you're playing like that prowess build of burn, or you're just playing with a lot of small haste creatures, alongside Cavalcade of Calamity, perhaps. This is going to be awesome for you. Again, it will see limited play. It will see play outside of limited and constructed formats too. Castle Garenbreg. Now, this one is actually pretty interesting to me because this is the green variation. Taps for green. You have to have a forest for it to come into play untapped. 2 green and 2 tap at 6 green mana. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells or activate abilities of creatures. So you might look at this and say, well, I can only play this on creatures or creature abilities, and I'm getting 6 green, so it doesn't fix color at all. It ramps me a little bit just by 2, but if I'm playing like a Gruul deck, it might not be perfect. Again, this is just a bonus ability for very little drawback. And you know what does cost 6 mana? Primeval Titan. Yeah, think about that. This card is totally going to see play with that card. Castle Locthwain. This one is a Russian language preview, and this is the one that taps for black mana. And the ability this time is 2 black and 1, tap, draw a card, then you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. This is probably the best one. Drawing cards is just awesome. That's not that bad of an ability cost either, 2 black and 1. And sure, you're going to lose some life from time to time, but to trade life for cards, yeah, that's usually not a bad thing unless you're really low on life. When it comes to standard, this one is going to synergize well with Knight of the Ebon Legion, because in that case, you actually could take that life loss and use it to your advantage. Ultimately, this one especially is going to be fantastic. Castle Vantress. Okay, here's the one that corresponds with blue mana. This time, pay 2 blue and 2, tap, scry 2. This is probably my second favorite of the group. Scrying is a fantastic ability. Whenever you have extra mana, especially in a control build where you're going to be holding on to mana anyway, your opponent ends their turn and you haven't used all your mana. Wonderful, I can go ahead and scry 2. This is going to be especially good with God Eternal, Kefnet, and Standard. Okay, those are the preview cards for today. Tomorrow we're going to come back and do this again, look at all the cards that are revealed over the next 24 hours or so. Until next time though, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon and have a great day.